welcome everybody to a brand new episode of Overcast. But this is different. This is Breaking WoW. We have returned with the boys once again because we have to talk about talents on the gym.
I mean, we did cover talents a little bit, but that was mostly from two nerds through two noobs. Idiots. But now we're getting into the deep, the meat of the thing, the stuff.
We're gonna get the super hot takes from the biggest brains that could ever be on the class Discord's theorycrafting side. You know the folks. The Guiltyas from the druid Discord. We have Publik, main attraction in the Shadow Priest world, Panthea, big ass tank, and Wordup, the enhancement shaman who never gave up. You know it. I mean, we are missing Mandl, granted, but the man has a lot of things to be.
He's saving the world.
And I know he wanted to be here and talk a lot about the blood talents. I'm 100% sure his blood is boiling out. Shut up.
Blood boil.
But regardless, we're going to get into the Dragonflight Talents because, it's a very, very hot topic. And I think we can start it off with, what the boys think on, let's say, this first look. Probably things will change, but let's kick it off.
Yeah, we'll probably go into details eventually.
Yeah, let's go with Guiltyas. So, Guiltyas, you saw this. Okay. We're going to get into some specifics because you're a druid, so you've been chosen, yeah. But, at a first glance, what do you make of this?
I think, it's interesting. I think conceptually it's interesting. I still think it can be a good system. I do think there's some really big issues with how they're approaching designing the trees, particularly in regards to, I had a big post that put it on Twitter and various places. But there's big issues with things like capstones and early pathing. And really, I think talent trees only work if you do actually have if there's opportunity cost. If by taking something down towards the bottom of the tree, it locks me out from something somewhere else. But if the way they've been designed at the moment, and this does kind of overlap a little bit into tuning, which I want to try and avoid mostly, but I think there's big flaws in how they've been designed, and they need to focus more on limiting the spread you can have across the tree.
True. This is from what we saw currently. Now, this is very, very early on. Public, what about you, man? What's your feel on this? What's your take on this?
Yeah, so I think there's no priest tree, so a lot of my feedback is more generic about what I'm just inferring based on what I've seen. I think my two big problems, I think there are too many spells in the talent tree that are currently baseline that have been moved into talents. That feels pretty bad. There are some things that people have had as baseline into their kit for years and years and years, and I think some of them don't feel right to give up. I think occasionally putting them into the talent tree could make sense, but it just feels kind of weird. I think that happens a lot more in the generic tree than the spec specific tree, but I think, I don't know, that kind of plays into my second point. I think there's just way too many choices. And I think a lot of them, especially early on, don't seem to really matter. Sometimes you're choosing between 10% damage on this spell or 10% healing or whatever. And I think they're just not interesting choices until you get further down the tree. When you fully spec out your tree, I just feel like there's too many options that aren't exciting enough. And it feels really overwhelming, I think, because of that. And I think they can kind of kill two birds with one stone in that reduce some of the options, put more of them back baseline and have the tree be filled with more interesting choices rather than okay, well, I have to take these three rows right here because I want this option way down here, but I really don't care about any of these in this line, or they don't change what I do, right?
Yeah.
So that's the part that's kind of meh to me.
I guess at first glance, it does look that they're a little bit convoluted. It does look like there's a lot of stuff there and not everything is meaningful. But I think this was kind of always the case to some regard with the talent trees in WoW. I'm curious, Panthea, what do you think, man?
I mean, I think it's a good initial framework. It's just, it can only be seen as a rough draft because, Guilty said, there's a lot of opportunities where you want to go down a certain path, but you'd think, that capstone talent is cool, but to get there, I have to go through a lot of crap stuff. And there's even some choices in the DK tree where oh, I have to pick the enhancement for a talent that I've not selected to get to something that I want.
Okay, that's a little bit weird.
I mean, yeah, that just is the purpose of it, because you're like, you want to get somewhere, you have to enhance something you don't use. Clearly, it's very early.
I think we also touched it when we talked about it. It feels like a few of them have been placed there with like no clear end goal in sight. We were mentioning the Guardian Druid, for instance, has like 3 types of berserks you can all talent into. And that's I mean, if that's what they're going with, that's fine, but that doesn't seem to be consistent across all the other specs where you can just like empower one big ass cooldown to have like different kinds of things. And then you have like the opposite side of the spectrum, like Panthea mentioned, where you take things that don't even like they don't do anything because you don't have the talent for it. So
you don't have the talent.
They're I would expect them to probably rearrange some of them, reposition. Although we can go deeper into this a little bit later. And I'm curious to know what Wordup is.
Wordup was very very peculiarly quiet this time around. Wordup.
I was giving them. I think there's like 2 glaring issues that I have with it. One is the lack of like horizontal pathing that you can do.
Yeah.
Like where you go down the path, you are locked in down that side. Especially the DK one really gave that away, where if you want to go down to the bottom on one side, that you have to go all the way from top to bottom. There's no like intermingling, or like if I want to go left side, but I want the thing on the right side, I can't divert down and get to the right. I have to do left and right, and that I think limits choices. And the other really strange issue is that there's a lot of things that are being like forcibly locked in that don't correlate with the things that you have to go through to get there. There are capstone talents, or there are big talents that don't have anything to do with all of the bits that come before it. Or there are things that you really want that are locked behind things that you don't want at all. And I understand that it's the opportunity cost part, but it does feel a little bit rubbish, I would imagine, to invest a lot of points into healing spells that you're never going to cast because you're in cap form to get to, say, Soothe, which is like a mandatory utility for certain things.
I will point out, in particular, in regards to Soothe, Soothe is super accessible to all druid specs.
Oh, I was using that as like
I
was using that like as a generic example, but like I can see it happening already in there, that there's a possibility that really important things get locked behind stuff that makes someone go, well, that is really important, but do I really want to invest 8 points to get to that utility? I don't know. I'd rather get this very, very mandatory 3% crit.
Yeah, I think
5% damage.
And that's what we wanted them to avoid, right? Of like, you shouldn't, I think 9 times out of 10, you shouldn't have to give up damage to get a different utility option. That feels bad, right?
Yeah.
Or I won't say damage, I'll say throughput. Like there are lots of these options where it's like, okay, do you want throughput or do you want utility? And I dislike, I think having those choices occasionally is fine, but I think having them be defining 30% of the talent trees is really feels bad.
I also think there's a big issue, particularly on the druid tree, where some of the points of utility are locked behind damage points.
Yeah,
so for instance, if you want to get Cyclone, you have to take, like, so say I'm playing Feral. Cyclone is currently baseline, it's now on the talent tree. But say I'm playing Feral, I have to then put 3 points into healing and magic damage in order to get Cyclone.
Yeah. I think it's kind of the downside of the tree that they've made, like, because you have to go in the tree order, right? You can just be like, yep, I want Cyclone, you know? That is the current advantage of the existing system that we have today in Shadowlands, where it's like, you just pick your options. There's no prereqs to what you want.
Because of the amount of investment that you have to do to get to some of these things as well, especially in the generic tree, I feel like with the amount of points available, there's a lack of ability to actually specialize in something, which is what I feel like the trees were supposed to be aiming to do.
Can you kind of go forward with what you mean? Like you're saying, like
You're-
I'm a Shadow Priest and I want to really go into a dot build or something. That's what you're getting at.
I'm thinking more like when you look at the way that the tree is structured, if you wanted to build your druid to be something that was like very utility focused on the general tree, there's stuff that's spread out all over the place while also having damage things. So if you have a lot of utility that is available, you have to then sacrifice basic performance concerns to get there. Like, then you aren't specializing into being utility. You're basically saying, I'm going to be a bad damage dealer for healing. And I don't think that's a healthy decision.
No, and it's not going to be healthy for the player base when like they're going to read the guides that we all write or the videos we put out. And we're like, yeah, take this talent tree to do the most damage for this single target fight.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like, well,
create wrong choices. And that's the ultimate. Frankly, it's the ultimate sin of what all of this could do.
And that's what we want to avoid because we have that today.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's like the biggest problem with the current system, right? Is that there are dead choices in our talent trees, and I think a lot of us were looking at this, and I think it's still there, right? This is still super early. This is just us giving feedback of like it's seemingly doubling down on that problem rather than solving it, is what we're saying.
I think the class tree basically just needs to be completely damage neutral.
There's also
a couple of like, is a really cool idea. If it's
I agree.
Damage neutral.
I'm a big fan of the class tree concept, but right now there's like I think one of my biggest concerns is immediately where Innovate is placed. Sets off so many alarm bells for the design intent.
I mean, Innovate and Vigil. In general, the right-hand side of the tree is like super utility heavy, and the left-hand side of the tree is not.
But like even DK, it's got Rune Weapon, A-Bomb, Lemon, Soul Reaper at the bottom of the class tree. Like that's like especially Soul Reaper, and Panthea probably knows more than I do about Death Knights, but like I don't know, putting that at the bottom of the class tree seems just absolutely wild to me.
The whole unholy side of the tree is very underwhelming. And you have to invest so much to actually get something useful out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
You just ignore it and just go full in on Frost, which just gives you so much throughput, so much resource generation.
I think the DK class tree in general is extremely.
I think that one's the one that's the most aggressively gated in that it's a one path thing, and that's
it's basically like 3 columns.
Yeah, and that's not what I was expecting this tree to be. I was expecting it to be a little bit more like cross-pollination between each route that you can go down. Be.
Like, horizontality makes it so much more interesting. Like, if you look at the Guardian tree, like, the Guardian tree has so many interesting decisions. But if you actually look at the numbers, and like Resto as well, Resto has a lot of horizontality to it. And if you look at the numbers of the potential options you have between the different druid specs, is actually extremely telling. It's something like 192k for balance, 177k for feral, and then it's like 1.1 million for Resto and 1.5 million for Guardian. Like, there's 10 times as many more different ways you can spec in Guardian as opposed to feral or balance, because it has so much more horizontality. Like, there's so many different paths you can take to get to different things. And that's just a much better design, in my opinion, than what some of the others are showing.
The problem with that, and I've only seen this there's only a few examples of this, does that open up more choices that are actually just straight up wrong? And like, so for example, I just checked this again. The Death Knight class tree, you can spec into Sacrificial Pack, which blows up your ghoul, but you can take that without actually getting a ghoul.
Yeah.
So Summon Ghoul is a talent on the upper side of the tree, but you can spec into Sacrificial Pack without having that. So if you don't understand that as a player, like, that's like just a dead talent. Like, you're actually picking something that doesn't work because of what you've chosen. And so that's kind of my fear with like adding paths everywhere. It's like, how many of choices like that have they put in here and kind of screwed themselves, I guess?
I think it's mostly fine on the Guardian one.
They have a couple of choices where like you pick something and then there's like a side upgrade to it that's just like stems right away from it. I don't know if it was a Convoke choice or something in the druid tree, if I recall. You just pick something and then you have only one other option down that doesn't connect to anything else, and that just upgrades it. So I can see
all of the convokes have that. Yes.
Yeah. So they could probably do something with a sacrificial pact in that sense, I suppose. Whatever, you can take like a core thing and then you can upgrade it in X, Y, Z. But you guys did mention something, and I was actually curious to know what you think, because if I recall, initially when they mentioned talents, they said that we're gonna have our interrupts in the talent tree. This exact topic was approached. I don't remember if it was by Ian or whoever did this, but this exact topic was approached that they don't want players to have to choose between utility and throughput, like you guys said. However, now that we've seen the talent, the class, the general sections are filled with a lot of spells and a lot of utility and a lot of damage. And I don't know how they can do, like you guys said, to choose between utilities. So like I don't have to go 90% deep to get Innervate or to get Cyclone, but then not have access to and not need all of that. But would it help if they put all of those in a horizontal space? Because I'm thinking of how the talents are now, where you have rows, you have the utility row, and you have the big cooldowns row. But if they do that horizontally, doesn't that spread you a little bit too far apart? Like, how do you guys see this issue coming about? So considering that if they make the general class tree, like Guilty mentioned, pure or non-throughput options, wouldn't that clutter the specs even more with what they would have to take from the general to put into the specs? How do you guys see this being a better way to implement it?
My immediate concern with it is, and I'll just go straight back to Innovate there. When you look at a raid comp, Innovate is going to be something that you are expected to have by your raid, because it's directly important to how you build the comp and so on. So if there is no horizontal path to get there, but you are on the feral side, because there are mandatory feral things on the left, you have to sacrifice an egregious amount to get all the way down there. And sometimes maybe you're sacrificing other utility, like in the case, you're probably going to end up sacrificing 1 minute Stampeding Roar to get there.
Yeah.
So that means that you have to. Well,
it's like you're going to want to take the 3-point. Like all of this gets fucked up by the DPS talents.
Yeah, it's because it's so locked off to one side, and there's no way to sneak down to the other way. That means that Innovate is going to be the one where you have people go, "Oh, you don't have Innovate? Well, then we'd rather have a balanced druid in then," kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the tree fails right now. That's the example of something that they need to distinctly avoid, no matter what. I think
it's just about it making sense. Like, when you have a tree design, as you get further down the tree, it should mean that you're doubling down on some aspect, right? Like, this side is revolving around like Heartstrike and Dancing Replin or something. And as you go down, it just keeps getting better with that. But like Innervate feels kind of just randomly placed at the bottom of the balanced side of the class tree, which, like, sure, it's a balanced spell, but like speccing into Innervate shouldn't require you taking Sunfire damage in Moonkin form.
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't.
It's also like the right hand side of the tree is all of the druid utility. Like, you've got Remove Corruption, so Dispel, that's on the Cyclone, that's on the right hand side, Hibernate, right hand side, Typhoon, right hand side, Mass Entangle or Ursol's Vortex, right hand side, Innovate, right hand side, Nature's Vigil, right hand side.
Skull Bash is on the left side.
Skull Bash is on the left hand side. Unfortunately, balanced druids do get an interrupt elsewhere. But like, it's very trivial to start on the Moonkin side, go all the way down right, and still get a Skull Bash or 1 minute Stampeding Roar. Whereas if you have to spec down the left-hand side, then you then have to invest more points because all of the utility is on there. I think, in this is particularly druid-specific, but the tree is just very... And the class tree shouldn't be so unbalanced. The class tree should be spread out a bit more.
You're saying it basically gives balance what they want, but does not do the same for someone that wants like feral or bear damage.
Yes.
Or bear throughput, I should say. Which and the contrast is really interesting because Skullbash is on row 5 on the left.
It's on row 5, gated behind a 3-point talent.
And for Death Knights, Mind Freeze is on row 2.
Yeah.
So like to what you were saying earlier, you know, like, okay, investing into Mind Freeze takes 2 points, and then you get it. And you can do that regardless of where you are, right? Like you can go all the way down on Unholy. Yeah. Bam, bam, Mind Freeze, done.
Like it's the same for Soothe and Stampeding Roar. Any druid can get those with 3 points from anywhere on the tree. Like once you get down to that level, you can start a new row at Wild Charge, Soothe, Stampeding Roar, 3 points, 1 mobility, utility, another bit of utility.
So yeah, this kind of goes back to the root problem that you were saying, though, right? Of like when you throw Throughput talents into here as choices against utility, these kind of problems are just going to happen. Like designing a perfect tree, while trying to do that is just they're setting themselves up for failure, just right out the get go. Like if they just make the class tree non-throughput only, they would have such a much better time with this and a lot better feedback, I think.
And to not be accusatory, but still probably a little bit incendiary, it does feel when you compare Balance and Feral on that tree there, Balance did literally get the things that make Feral pretty good. And they said, technically, Feral, you can get the things that make Balance good, technically, but it's going to be, you're going to have to give up a lot to get there, and you probably don't want to. And that feels a little bit off. Because it's not exactly like everyone's screaming to take Feral right now either. Because it's already the weaker utility spec.
Yeah.
So I have that sets off alarm bells for me in the future going and looking at other pure DPS. How are they going to structure the pure DPS trees where there's a definite outlier better spec? Are they just going to get the wink to maybe get the good thing, but not really? And if that's the case, then the tree feels like it's failed.
And it's probably exacerbated for druids, if I'm being honest. Like, druids have always historically had some of the most utility options in the game. You know, just the nature of their spec. They have 4 specs to choose from. They've added a lot of stuff over the years. Like, so I think it'll be really interesting what we see with the other specs. And is this more of a druid problem, or how do they approach it with other specs? Because we only have 2 classes, so a lot of this we're kind of inferring a little bit, but
yeah.
Well, if they were
think that,
sorry, go on.
Damage in the tree is the number one biggest issue I have with the class tree. If you remove damage from this tree, it opens up so many more interesting choices. Because something like Primal Fury, which is fairly deep on the left hand side, this isn't an option. Something like 3% crit, that's not an option. Realistically, you're going to take those. Always,
which is annoying because that's not exciting.
It's not exciting, but it's also just mandatory. And this is super Feral specific, but with Owl Weaving, there's so many points on the tree where you just actually don't have a choice. You will always put these points in no matter what. So realistically, you end up with 3, 4 points, 5 points maybe, that you're actually choosing where to spend. Which
and I think it's hard because I think and I love Panthea's opinion on this, because this choice almost feels more for healers than tanks, because I think as a healer or a tank, you are often making decisions about, do I want throughput or defensive here? Throughput versus defensive. That's kind of how, and it's especially pushing content is how do I eke out the most damage possible while not dying? So and that is fun. But the tricky part is, that same class tree that might have those philosophies are shared with your other specs. So I think that's why, if you want those kinds of choices for tanks and healers, those should go in the spec tree of yep, you can make your hots better as the resto druid, or you can just be, more damage instead. But putting that in the base class tree kind of leaks that problem into the DPS specs, which is like priest. I can see it right now of click this talent to get power infusion cast on someone else because it's you as well. And it's like, well, fuck, now I have to take that, right? So yeah, Panthea, I don't know what you think about that.
I mean, for DK at the moment, there's not really any kind of utility in the class tree itself. It's all kind of in the blood tree, but it's also majorly locked away in the blood tree where you just don't pick it half the time. So to use my example earlier of where you're taking talents where you don't have the thing it synergizes with, if I want to pick Purgatory, I have to take essentially improved Gorfine's Grasp without taking Gorfine's Grasp. So if I want to cheat death, I lose my mass grip because of how the power is distributed throughout the tree.
Well, you can get both. You just give up a lot of throughput.
Yeah, you give up a lot of throughput, and then you have this internal dilemma of, I want this so I can survive, but losing out on something else means that my group members have a harder time. You know, mobs aren't going to be grouped up better. Mobs aren't going to be slowed effectively. And those
I
are the
think Dolphin's Grasp is a good one, yeah. That just shouldn't be where it is.
Doesn't that exist already on the tree? Like on the generic tree too, though? Because we've seen this tier. But if we've seen this tier of any, Abomination Limb is something that was very important on certain specific encounters. So you're basically going to say, well, we need Abomination's Limb for this boss. So you need to barrel all the way down the center tree, no matter what else you want on the others, because if you don't have that, then you don't do the thing that we need you to do.
That's going to be the same for both DPS, DK specs as well, because AMC is in the middle of the tree, and that's also the path to Abomination Limb.
Oh, but I think the point...
That sort of removes it from being a choice then, doesn't it? Because it's no longer like you get to decide, you have to go through there.
Yeah.
You're always going down the blood path.
On these sides as well, goddamn.
Yeah, going down the middle for DKs on the class tree is also a 68 and Death Advance. So it's like, okay, guess I have to go here now. And the point about Gorfreen's...
That begs the question, though. Does it really revamp the talent tree? Because all it's doing is saying, well, these are 15 points that you have to spend all the time. And if you don't,
class tree is egregiously bad.
You're an idiot. At which point, that's really bad.
And to double down on what Panthea is saying, like, Gorfine's Grasp is like mostly all the way down on the blood side of the tree, which is somewhat insulting considering it's just baseline in the spec right now. So, and that's what I was saying earlier. Like, it feels really crappy for, a Death Knight to be like, yeah, well, if you want Gorfine's Grasp to be like as good as it is now, like you have to go spec all the way over there on this. And it's like, well, it feels bad you're nerfing my baseline ability and then putting it in the talent tree.
This Titan Grasp, Gorfine's Grasp improved, is just placed so egregiously badly. Like, there's no universe where this should be placed where it is. Like, I know I was saying Horizontality is good, but this is a talent that doesn't do anything unless you take a talent before it, and you can get to it in multiple different ways.
And you can also completely...
And it's a 2-pointer.
Taking Blood Boil as Blood DK, but you're forced to take Hemostasis, which improves Blood Boil, which is the only way that Blood Boil becomes useful in your rotation.
Yeah, so if you want Purgatory, Bone Storm, and Gorfine's Grasp with Dancing Weapon, you have to spec into improved Blood Boil without actually getting it. Like, that's legit.
There's instances of this on like, although I'm very biased because I only really play melee. Let's be honest. So, like, I have the feral examples. I think that Survival Instincts is maybe one of the most aggressively points on any of the trees, because it is your mandatory defensive tool. Like, it's your big I'm not going to die button. And it's placed beneath Brutal Slash, which is something that is at best niche, but also alters a core ability to not behave like it normally does.
Detrimental.
So it forces you to spend a point that you might very specifically not want to spend to get to the thing that makes you not die. And that deters people from wanting to take it, even though if you don't have it, you might just not survive some bosses, which is an incredibly bad precedent.
Yeah. But to make it worse, this is semi-leaky, but I have been informed that all of the talents on the current tree that replace abilities still replace abilities on the new tree. So Brutal Slash replaces Swipe, which is our AoE combo point generator. So if you want Survival Instincts in Mythic Plus, you have to give up pressing your AoE combo point generator more than once every 12 seconds because it's on Brutal Slash is on 3 charges. So if you're doing Mythic Plus, taking Brutal Slash is actively detrimental to how you play the game. But you have to take it in order to get to Survival Instincts. That is obviously something that can change, right? But
yeah, that's obviously like a tuning concern because the problem really is that Brutal Slash is tuned to be poor. But at the same time...
Well, the problem is that it mechanically doesn't function well in AoE, in sustained AoE.
It's mostly the precedent that it sets, that it means that you could have a button that's really important locked behind something else that warps your rotation that you don't want. And that's the one thing that should never happen in any of these trees.
For DPS specs.
I actually think that should be for any spec, tank, healer, whatever. No one should have something super core that is locked behind a rotationally warping button. Like,
rotational.
Something that removes the functionality in exchange for something else. That should be something that's like one of the sideline talents, one of the ones that's off that you opt into. It should never be mandatory.
Yeah,
but they should also fix Brutal Slash, right? Like, I mean, I guess that's a different problem.
Too, yeah.
But...
that's its own little can of worms. Yeah.
It's weird because I initially when I saw the quote unquote revamp of the talent trees, I really wasn't expecting from them to take like baseline shit and put it in there. I was actually expecting the other way around. More stuff from the old talent trees back into baseline and bring either something new or just, fill it out with the
old tier sets, old legendaries.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we talked about this, right?
Being stripped away feels really bad as well. Like stuff like the improved shred, improved. I don't know why the fuck it's called improved prowl, but improved rig. Like why is this 2 talents, let alone a talent?
Yeah, exactly.
This is just baseline it's not even like a baseline ability that's been put into the tree. It's baseline functionality of an ability that they've taken out. They've like split it in half. They've split it into 3 and like
we're dancing around the actual one that's bad, and it's the entire Berserk situation.
The entire Berserk thing. I was going to get to it eventually.
Really, that's the. It's not even. That's the one that's.
In order to have
immediately alarming
functioning as it does on live. So Berserk is a baseline ability. In order to have the functionality you have on live,
without any talents,
you need to invest 4 points
in the new system.
As in 4 points into abilities, not 4 points like in travel. You need to have improved tread. You need to have improved prowl. You need to have Berserk relentlessness. You need to go down to the left. You need to have Berserk jungle stalker. All to get 1 cooldown.
I think that the point that got me the most is that a lot of the things that are being used with how good Berserk is, like, because right now, effectively, they've made Berserk a really important part of Feral on live. But what they've done here is a lot of the components that they've got of Berserk that work together, they've made sure to put them on polar opposite sides of the tree, where you have to go over here and then over there, and you have to go all the way over everywhere to actually make it do what it does right now on live.
But to make it even worse, you go all over that tree, and it doesn't fucking matter because all of the capstones suck fucking ass, and there's no fucking options in this tree. Because there's so many 3-point options. Like, I think Feral is the only tree we've seen that has 3-point options in the spec tree.
No, a lot of them. I think that almost all of them have at least one. I thought.
Balance has at least one. Okay, but Feral has, don't think Guardian or Resto have any, which leads significantly more to why they have so many more options. They both have more nodes, and they've got no 3 points.
Yeah.
Do you think that might...
Because you have so many, you can just path everywhere. And because the bottom talents suck.
Well, that's what we were saying, like, and those 3-point ones are typically really, really boring.
Yeah.
you know, like to give an example, like Blood Death Knight, Heart Strike damage increased by 10%. You can do that 3 times. Okay. And then on the other side, stamina increased by 10, 20, 30%. It's like, why the fuck are these talent points? Like, they just feel like they had a placeholder thing. They had to put something there that wasn't interesting because they wanted a choice down the road. And that it just feels like a forced, crappy decision.
I'm just hoping it is a lot of placeholder stuff here. Because just quoting Ian, when he basically said we really want to get this system out there to you guys so you can see what it's all about. And I'm hoping that this is like super placeholder, early, whatever. Although judging by what Guiltyas said earlier,
I have heard that the feral tree is very work in progress. But frankly, I'm going to treat it as if it is brand new because
we have to for proper
if I'm nice about it, I don't get any changes. So I'm going to be as harsh as I possibly can.
If you put it out there for feedback, then you should expect feedback, good or otherwise. Yeah. And that's the point. Like none of it is meant maliciously.
No, but philosophically, it's weird. Like when you just segment an ability that has 10% more damage here, 10% more there, and 10% there. It's segmented for the sake of having three more points to put in. Philosophically, that feels weird and wrong. This is what I'm saying. Maybe it's placeholder, maybe there's something else there. But if they go this route, it's gonna be.
The other thing as well is like really, I would say, pretty big buttons that people really enjoy are being placed behind other things that they probably don't want. Like
or don't care.
I'd say Convoke is a really good example on, once again, the feral tree, that they have to pass through things that they don't want generally, or that they've never played as effects, because they just aren't very interesting, useful, or whatever. But to get to Convoke something that is, frankly, pretty core to feral at this point in Shadowlands, they have to go through all of those. So that's like the inverse of doing the split the button up. And you aren't splitting it, but what you are saying is you have to drop all of these points to get to the button that you really care about, and you don't care whatever you pass through.
It was something that Panthea Mandl would complain about. The Abomination limb is like a really strong button, but because there's so much throughput on the left-hand side of the tree, it makes it really hard for them to take Abomination limb. It's locked behind shit they don't care about.
Makes it hard for us to take anything on the unholy side of a tree.
Yeah.
Because on there you do have some interesting things like, Soul Reaper is thematically interesting. It's a DK execute button, and you just will never take it because of so much power on the frost side of the tree. And there's also stuff on the unholy side of a tree that you do have now. Control Undead, you just won't take anymore. Grip of the Dead, which is the Death and Decay slow, you just won't have anymore. You essentially removing power, but you're removing utility to gain power, and fundamentally this is a somewhat competitive game. People are always going to make that decision.
Yeah, and what I was saying earlier is kind of, you see this throughout, but it just feels like they have two different like schools of thought with these trees that's kind of playing out of like, we had this idea and we talked about this in like weeks ago when we were talking about the talent redesign in general, of like they could start building into these like legit specialized builds of like, and I mentioned this earlier, of like, okay, the right side of the shadow tree is going to be heavily investing into your damage over time spells. And the left side of the tree is going to be way more into like burst insanity spenders, right? But they have these throughout, like Feral, same thing. It could be like a bleed side of the tree, combo point spender side, right? But so it kind of feels like they're starting, like they're trying to make that a thing, but they're also throwing in things in there as like placeholders or like, the middle choices in between the things you care about that kind of make that more destructive. And I feel like the thought isn't continued throughout the tree, and it's just not cohesive. Like going from the top of your tree all the way right side should make very perfect sense why each thing is preceded by something else, but they don't all seem related to each other. So like if A-Bomb's limb is the capstone of that class row, everything in that kind of middle row should all be like grip focused, right? So that's like put Death Grip and Gorfine's Grasp way up at the top, as you go down further, okay, here's extra charges for them. Here's reduced CDs of grips. And at the very end of the grip middle tree is A-Bomb Slim, right? As like, oh, that's a clear capstone because that middle row is all about gripping and CC, in like the crowd control of grips. But right now it's like, okay, we got some grip stuff over here, some grip stuff over here. Maybe it's in the spec tree, and then A-Bomb Slim is at the bottom. It's like, okay, I went on this crazy fucking journey and I ended up here. What the fuck did I have to take improved Death Strike for to get to A-Bomb Slim? Which is required.
That's the way that I feel like certain abilities, like A-Bomb in particular, is a really good one. Should be approached to something like that. You get the ability at the beginning, but it's a really shitty version of the ability, basically.
Yeah.
It's got a longer cooldown, it doesn't do any damage, and this and that. And then you travel down the tree, and one of them adds the damage, one of them adds the debuff, one of them makes it grip more often, one of them adds the proc for runic rhyme and so on. But like you have that after, but you get the button really early. It's really accessible. Because the button's the core. All of the extra bits is your options.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that you get the button right at the end after you invest all kinds of who knows what to get
random
there.
shit like Asphyxiate, Death Advance, AMZ, Death Strike, and then A-Bomb Slim. So what are we doing? Like, that doesn't make any fucking sense.
I'm okay with splitting abilities up to have like all of the passives ripped apart to like be down there, so long as the actual core functionality button is there, super accessible, like right in the middle, like or right at the top. That's how I would approach doing that, and I think that's like egregiously failed on the DK one.
Yeah, so it feels like they need to like really take a step back and be like, okay, there are 3 distinct play styles that we want to, or 4 if you're a druid, whatever it is, right? Like you have 3 distinct trees in the DK class tree, right? Make each one very thematic and specific of like, okay, this is what this is for, this is what this one's for. And if something doesn't fit that, put it back baseline where it was before, right? Or whatever, move it somewhere else. But don't chain things together. It doesn't make any sense.
The generic tree is like, it's something that you should be able to split up, and you can take half of all 3, say, or you can hyper specialize in one and take half of another. That kind of thing, like basically like old talent trees.
Old talents.
And you shouldn't feel forced to go down a row in order to, for like throughput reasons.
So from
like, it shouldn't be that I'm a Frosty K, so I have to go down the Frost row, or I'm a Blood, I have to go down the. Like, if I want to play a Frosty K and then pick up all this Blood utility, that's ideal. That's how it should work.
So it kind of feels a bit weird where you've picked a spec, so you're specialized in it, and your reward is 1 or 2 free talent points. You don't actually have anything that is built around that spec baseline.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've picked the Frosty K, so I've got an entire tree to being a Frosty K. My class tree shouldn't also be about me being a Frosty K.
It should be about you being a Death Knight, and you're like, yep, exactly. I'm a Frost Death Knight specializing in grips, or specializing in barriers, right? Or slows, right? Or whatever, exactly. Right? Like, and that's what we're saying. If you remove throughput in the class tree and give each kind of, like have 3 distinctive or 4 distinctive like enhancements that make you a better Death Knight rather than a better Frost Death Knight, I think you'd knock it out of the park.
Exactly, because that's what the actual talent tree for your spec is for. Exactly. That's the thing that is, I'm a Frost DK that specializes in burst, but that should be exclusively on the Frost side. Exactly. Anything that even remotely interferes with that on the generic one should either be super accessible or not there at all.
Exactly. You've already made the choice. You already have one tree. Yeah. Why is Primal Fury? Why the fuck is Sunfire AoE there? Like, this isn't something about... Yeah, Sunfire AoE is a fucking far right-hand side talent on class.
Primal Fury is an awkward one because that's not a small thing. That's like incredibly
okay, sorry. If you spec balance right now, you don't get Sunfire.
No.
Okay,
So you have to invest to get Sunfire.
Sorry, let me back up. What level do you have to be while leveling to get Sunfire? Are you like level 20?
Distributed. Something like that.
What the
Probably
fuck?
higher.
I mean,
Hold on,
don't
1, 2,
even
3,
consider
4,
like
6, 7.
you look at Frost. If you want to play Breath as a Frost DK, you have to go all the way down because you got to get Rune Weapon. You don't get a choice. So that means that if you want to go down that side of the Frost tree, then your generic tree is also locked, and that's where anytime that the choice is removed, it undermines the whole point of what this rework is supposed to be. To me, anyway.
I agree.
I'm hearing a couple of things, and this is just what goes through my mind right now, because a lot of the issues that we're talking about were probably issues attempted to be resolved by the devs by adding the current talent tree to get rid of this. But obviously, that's not a solution. One thing that I wanted to point out, first of all, is a question to you guys. When you mentioned, the hard strike increase, the 10, 20, 30% extra stamina, the filler nodes, because those kind of reek of, we had 61 points or 31 points to put in, and we didn't know what to put in, so we're just putting like you said, like shred, like we're breaking down an ability into like something that you have to put in 4 points for, which is something that I already did with Shadowlands, if you recall. I think going from BFA with the unpruning, and we needed to feel like we're getting something leveling from 50 to 60, like Blood Decay, for instance. They took Ossuary away from the talents, which was something really, really available early on for Blood, and they put it into something like 56 or whatever. Or for Red Paladins, where in Wings you couldn't cast Hammer of Wrath while you were leveling until you got like 56 or whatever, right? That was weird, because that they did that already. So now this is more of that, and that was already weird. So my first question to you guys is, do you think there's just way too many talent points, or no, not talent points, but talent options? Because there's a lot of filler ones. And the second thing is, because from the issues with the capstones that you mentioned, it feels like one quick fell swoop way to solve it is to put the capstones at the beginning of the talent tree and then just further specialize on top of that. So if you need Cyclone or a bomb limb or whatever, you don't have to spend 20 points you don't want just to get to the bottom and then have that wasted. Instead of, you can put like I don't know, off the top of my head, you have in the general talent druid talent tree, you have Innervate, Cyclone, Massentang, and Mighty Bash or whatever, right? They're all first available, they're all utility, and then you specialize. Oh, if you go Mighty Bash, bro, you maybe get Maim later on or whatever.
You get Solar Beam.
But that's what I mean. This is like a rough estimate. So that's the second question. Do you guys think that a solution would be to move the capstones to be at the top of the tree, so you can just get them? So this is, I want to be a grip decay, and then you specialize into grips further down the road, and you can specialize as much as you want instead of having to specialize into grip first and then get the A-bomb lid, which is kind of a little bit weird. That would make sense if it's in the spec tree instead of the general tree. So first of all, too many talent points. Instead of just having one, get improved shred, and you get all the bonuses into one instead of like 4 different points, and then capstones should be at the top. What do you guys think?
I think capstones do need to be powerful. Like, psychologically, players are going to rush to the bottom because that's what people do on trees. Like, they always try and get to the bottom because the bottom is usually the most powerful. So I do think you need to be gaining significant power, like, as you approach down. I think it's kind of play it by ear. Something like Abomination Limb, it's like the core. I think of Abomination's Limb is that it's the grip. Like, that is what it gets used for a lot of the time.
I think straight Abomination Limb is the easiest one that you could theoretically like think of how you would structure a tree.
Yeah,
where you gave the capstone early, and you replace where Abomination Limb is now with the the legendary, where a bomb limb is like a 20% damage increase when it hits something. That's like the end point. You've gone all the way down the tree. You've earned a big, fancy thing. But a bomb limb itself, the functionality of the grip, how much damage it does, all the procs, all of that just filters up. Yeah. But you get the grip functionality super early, no problem. You can grab that without any issue.
But I think that the issue with this and the kind of design, and I think you could put the capstones at the start, but you need to remove throughput from the tree. I think like it would be kind of destructive to put the capstones at the top if all of the capstones are all throughput based, because then it's like, okay, well, you can get all the throughput options for free, or not for free, but cheaply. But I think in a world where the base class tree is mostly just utility, then I think it would make sense if like you can get the baseline level of utility at the very top, and at the very bottom of it, at that point, it's like godlike utility. But just for that one.
It's like specializing to it, making it better, as opposed to just having the baseline functionality of it grips shit.
Right. So like, because like, it'd be dangerous what you were saying earlier of like, okay, well, if you flip the Death Knight tree and you just give them Empower Rune Weapon, A Bomb Limb, and Soul Reaper, it's like, holy shit.
It's definitely not something you can do universally.
That would be like, frankly, the DK one is weird because the capstone ones are all 3 big damage cooldowns.
They're huge.
Effectively. Yeah. And that's an unusual thing, especially when you compare it to the Druid one, like what you get at the end. You've got utility or an incredibly playstyle warping weird new thing for Feral. But for the...
I don't even think it's going to be used by Feral. It's fucking garbage.
But the DK one, those are 3 big buttons, like pretty... like relatively iconic buttons that are pretty core to what the old specs were or are. That's a different situation. Yeah. But I think you could navigate it. Like I don't think that throughput should be strictly removed from the generic one. They should just be tempered a bit better. They should be done smarter. And I think maybe the most egregious ones are the ones that are like generic flat damage increases that are present there. Like 3% crit on the tree, especially really deep, that's not okay.
I think just
I know it's a filler talent.
Like, if you have utility and damage reductions near the top, then you've then got 3 points to spend further down the tree in what you want to specialize. Because you've got this conflict of interest where you're wanting to get specific things further down, so you're forced down the path. But if it's further up, then that issue's resolved.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier. Like, it just feels like they're trying to accomplish too many things with this, and that you can't give us meaningful utility choices when they're sitting next to meaningful throughput choices. You can't. Every single player is going to pick the throughput, or they're going to be forced to take the utility, and then their spec is hemorrhaged in the throughput, and it's like, oh, but you need to buff feral druids. And it's like, well, feral druids are actually just forced into taking innervates, so they're just shit, but they need to take innervate. And it's like, okay, well, do you buff feral because of that? You know, like, I don't know.
And then you get some feral who doesn't have to take innervate.
I don't strictly mind there being some in there. If it's like you only get to really pick one of the paths that leads to damage. But when you have ones where it starts to become a conflict of, I have to pick a lot of useless utility to get there, but I do absolutely need it because it's really good, but it's really deep, then you start getting the problems of, I can't even specialize because these aren't my points anymore. They're the points that are basically designed to already be locked in. And I have to get them.
It depends on what the utility is there, right? Like, I think there's a different classification of utility where it's like, Mighty Bash is a single target stun. Valuable? Sure. Specific? Yeah, kind of. Is the raid ever going to be like, if you don't take Mighty Bash, you're benched for this fight? Absolutely not. Like, there will...
It's unique and situational stuff, yeah.
But on the other hand, Innervate, exact opposite, right? Like, super powerful external utility for someone else can actually help you kill a raid boss in ways you couldn't without it. And I think that's kind of the issue of, like, you know, you can't just kind of throw Innervate or Power Infusion or these external abilities kind of randomly in the same tree as, like, the same spot as, like, a defensive or single target CC kind of ability. Like, they're just different. They're just totally different, and they have different weights to them.
Yeah, like I can take Furrow, where I get no costs for 4 seconds after I've been in form for 20 seconds, or I can have Innovate and get a raid spot.
Yeah, so like on the Druid tree, you're choosing between Innervate, Renewal, improved stamp roar, which reduces the CD by 60 seconds, or the kind of automatic frenzied regen proc. And it's like, these things are not created equally.
I mean, even worse, because Stampeding Roar is just so accessible because of how that particular section of the tree functions.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest context is like people need to think about it in the terms of their own class. Like, what could they put on opposite sides that would cause this conflict? And I think you can think of quite a few of them. Like, imagine if the capstone for Priest, as an example, on the Shadow side was Vampiric Embrace, but on the Holy side, the Disc side, on the opposite end of the tree, on the right, was Power Infusion. And then you go, well, that is now a really not fair choice that I have to now make, because I'm playing Shadow. There's all of this stuff on the left side that's super Shadow oriented, but I really want Power Infusion, or my raid means that I have to have Power Infusion.
Yeah.
So, and I think anyone can come up with that for their own specs. That's where you get like the conflicts that have been highlighted by the Druid tree. The DK one is a different beast.
And to put this in a different perspective, the big issue with that is, to take your example, Shadow will be balanced around having Power Infusion, right? Like,
with the potential of being able to get it. Yeah.
The way that they do balancing in this game is they're like, okay, we're going to look at the people that are doing the best with the spec. That's your curve, right? More or less, right? So like, if someone that full specs out damage in their tree is doing 20k damage and they need to be doing 15, they're going to be nerfed down so that the top build of the spec is doing 15. But if some other Shadow Priest was taking more utility, they'd get adversely affected with some of those nerfs and balancing. It's not like you can just simply nerf Power Infusion and solve the problem. Like, some of these buttons or things you're talenting into are so core to some of these spec designs that it could really dangerously hurt balance in a way that's like, well, if you don't take this, not only are you not doing much damage, but you're also losing utility. I don't know. It feels bad.
I mean, I think we got some going on here. Sorry, Guilty.
No, I was just agreeing. It was just saying,
yeah.
I'm being doom and gloom for a reason, though. I want these to be better.
I mean,
exactly. Also, we're going to be stuck with them for fucking at least 2 years. So
we better get it out now. But we have been
now's the best time to do it, really, because like the longer that it goes, the more that they get locked in. So, conceptually, great idea. It's just there's a few warts that need to be fixed, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like,
also delete Sabertooth.
Especially for the long-term health of the system, because they've said this is not a Dragonflight system. Like, they want to build talent tree to last.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think they said like 3 or 4 expansions. Like, was their idea, which is fine. And I think what we're saying is, without setting it up to have a better foundation, it's going to really struggle to last that long without getting a major overhaul.
Yeah, it's knowing what the things are that are damaging with it, and if they know that and they adjust around that, then you can have a pretty robust system that you can even slot new things in, no problem, and it will be pretty healthy.
Yeah.
But if you put in like kill switches inside the trees already, then that's your own problem. Then, and that's hard to fix.
Yeah, and again, this is very early on. This is like the first iteration we got. There's like nothing to like really touch on, like, or test gameplay wise. We just have this information. I'm pretty sure that maybe in 2 weeks' times, this episode will be probably totally irrelevant. But as the boys mentioned, we have something. We're just gonna chew it out and put the highlights, whatever the highlights need to be addressed. Because if their philosophy on this is what seems to be happening here, then this is going to be problems, especially looking more for the future.
And to your point, it's not what Ian said a few weeks ago either. right?
Yeah, exactly. That also. But I mean, at this
It's
point,
a very. I think they did. Obviously, they did everything intentional, but I think they added the druid talent system first because it's maybe one of the most difficult to do, considering that maybe, although this is just from what we've heard so far, feral versus balanced utility in the raid has been discussed heavily in this expansion, maybe more so than any other two specs compared to each other within the same class, and at the same time. DK overall utility with AMZ has been a controversial topic throughout the expansion, especially in the first season as well. So I feel like they did this intentionally because these two are probably the classes that are going to be the most difficult to approach in terms of separating class from spec and making it all seem balanced and so on. So I think what we're doing right now is hopefully at least being looked at by somebody, because it is probably going to be more valuable to us and everybody else that's doing feedback in any way on the soup of whatever, because it's some of these just feel like thrown into the pot and just like stir and see what comes out.
yeah.
I actually disagree that druids and DK are the hardest ones to do. I think the hardest ones to do are the pure specs.
Well,
Because the pure specs are really, really hard to differentiate what's good and what like what works between specs. Mop is a really good example of how it can go too far in one direction where everything just feels the same. Because every hunter spec was just different shades of the same thing. And everyone knew it. They didn't say it, but everyone knew that that's what was happening. And I think that's a really difficult thing for them to get over. So those are the ones that I'm most interested in.
I mean,
That and obviously the other elephant in the room of how in the world did they make a demon hunter tree?
I was about to ask. Wait till we see the demon hunter.
That one's really scary.
I mean, like each class are going to have like very specific challenges. Like priest is going to have a
priest is a double healer issue. While
if they try to put power infusion in that tree, we're going to have a fucking riot, right? But I know they will. So it's like
it's going in the tree. Yeah,
every spec is going to have some kind of issue, I think, to be ironed out. So
the least defined specs are the least defined differences between specs in a class is I think the most difficult thing to do. And I think that especially things like I think rogue, mage, and warlock are going to be really difficult to actually show that off on the generic tree.
Especially if they mix trees in
there. No differential, like, yeah. Where the fuck is demonic gateway and healthstones going on the tree?
What are you going to give Outlaw Shadow Dance?
Summoning Stone is the capstone.
God, please no. No warlock's ever going to take it.
Poetically, it would make sense, right? You know, it's capstone, it's summoning stone. Come on, it's poetic. It's nice. It's a good metaphor.
Don't fucking talk to me anymore.
But come on, it's very, very early on once again, and I hope they retain this vibe, this attitude where things like this, you know, podcast forum posts and, you know, chats on Discord and whatnot do make a difference on some capacity, and changes might get in. From what we know, some internal alphas are going around, and we should be expecting at least something this summer, maybe more palpable in terms of, like, you know, testing out, because I do feel they'll have something ready with talent trees in there, so we can actually get some proper testing going on. And in terms of, you know, all of the discussion and feedback, I highly recommend everybody to check out the boys. You know, their links are in the description. Also the class Discord, you know, the drink grows, you know, the Warcraft priest. Is there still Warcraft priests?
It is
Public. Yeah. Tanknotes.com for Panthea. Enhancement also had, like, Shaman also has two places.
Shrine. There's ancestral games, but I think that's only resto.
Yeah, that's only resto. I mean, it's there's a lot of information, plus the fact like I know Guilty made a really nice post there, and I really picked a lot of the stuff from there for Feral. It's important that you guys also get proper educated ideas and argumented ideas, right? Not throw shit, because if there's going to be a change, it has to be with some solid facts, and not just being hating just for the sake of hating or trolling or shit like that. It's early. We talk about this, but because we love it and we have so much passion for it, and as Wordup mentioned, it's a very cool concept. We're just concerned about what we've seen so far. It's not that we're trying to trash anything, but concerns are there. And, we feel like, me and Flame feel like, okay, if we're not going to have people who are actually playing this game at a high level for a long time and also helping others by writing guides and theory crafting and getting a lot of data in, then who to listen to, right? It's basically, you can rely on folks like this who can have some good ideas to make the game work for the high end, and if it works for the high end, it will basically boil down to the, I would say, more casual end as well. Nobody wants to make it a game for the quote-unquote 1%, but problems can occur. If big problems occur on the quote-unquote 1%, you can be 100%
trickle down
sure.
somehow.
Yeah, like traps in the talents and all of that. Picking talents that make no sense in order to unlock something that you really need, depending on the gameplay and so on and so forth. So I think the talk this time around was uniquely productive based on the subject matter, because I think there was a lot of cool ideas all around. I don't know if you boys had any other things to put on the table regarding this. Just asking.
No, I think I'll end with I think based on what we've seen so far, I'm excited that we've gotten some of the stuff early, and honestly, timelines look like we still have a lot of time between now and when the game actually comes out, which hopefully means we have a lot of time to iterate on the stuff, which is good to see. So I'm excited to see where we go from here.
Yep, I'm hoping this is a lot more like Legion, where there's a big wind up and the trajectory is a lot more engage with everyone, actually see what works and cut the chaff that we don't need, instead of last minute drop everything in a bomb, and if it works, I don't know, let's hope that we've had recently.
We're doing our part. That's what it is.
For sure. I think the weird delay we've had with any information has actually weirdly made me more positive about the potential timeline.
I know, right?
Compared to what I was at one point. I was sure it was going to be November. I was fucking positive.
I feel like there's no way now that it comes out this year.
There's no way now. But I was so positive because every expansion releases either end of Q3 or Q4.
Yeah,
every single one apart from TBC. And I was positive we were going to get the same.
Yeah, I mean, financially it would make sense for them to do that, but I think at this point, if they would launch in a state that was similar to more recent previous expansion launches, it would definitely do more harm at this point in the current state of the game. So I think they know that.
I don't want to say the words, but I think if they do actually release a clanger, this one is going to be really hard to recover from.
Oh yeah, I think
So I'm that annoying guy who sits in your comments or anyone's comments saying that I hope that they delay it a bit more whenever I've seen the betas, and I'm so happy that for once they actually are just pulling it back a little bit and making sure that we actually have something that's
it looks promising.
Sure. They
kind of finished.
They have to do that. They have to do that. I mean, if it's going to launch in 2023, somewhere maybe Q1 2023, who knows? But I feel that would be for the better rather than catching the holiday period. It would just mean that
we don't need to say a date. Launch it when it's ready.
Exactly. Yeah, that's perfect.
That's it.
That's the old
season 4 to buy themselves time as well, and then there's free expansion. So
Wrath Classic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wrath Classic. Just give us alpha and beta so we can test out.
Overwatch 2. I mean, there's a ton of stuff releasing in the fall, but yeah, I mean, the point. I know the point still stands, right? Launch it when it's ready. Players will forgive you when it's good. They don't care. It'll take longer if it's good.
They won't.
They'll immediately forget any problems that's happened in the last ones as soon as the most recent thing was really good. It's that's happened how many times in the life cycle of this game?
Sure.
Once you only need to do it once for everyone to just go, we're back on track now. Happy days.
Because people are anxiously waiting to say, this is the WoW I used to love. This is the WoW I know. Everybody wants to say that again. So it's going to happen if they play their cards and take their time to make it as good as it can be. But I think we can wrap it up then. So it was beautiful. Thank you, gents, once again for joining and pouring in your ideas. Don't forget, everybody, if you're listening to this on Spotify, check the YouTube as well. Over there, you're going to have links to all of the boys, Guiltyas, Publik, Panthea, and Wordup. We're going to also have Mandl over there with the Acarus boys because he was not here, but I know he wished he could be here, so you can get some information.
His soul was filled.
Yeah, you could feel. I see some in the chat. But thank you, everybody, for listening, for watching. We shall catch you with a brand new episode on next Monday. Hopefully, not too many news to break up this one.
It's looking good. It's looking good so far.
Information will probably come in troves, but hopefully this episode will be relevant, at least in terms of like the ideas and what we talked about in terms of like the concepts and the philosophy going forward.
All right,
everybody, you have a great week ahead.
Take it easy.
As always.
Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW. Still.